Stihl, Husqvarna X-cut, Oregon chain, and then Carlton chain below that. If you know how to tune up a Carlton chain, it can be pretty good, but I dislike it. I don't use it at all, and I wish that I didn't even buy these reels of Oregon chain, because I actually think the Husqvarna chain is far superior. Between the Stihl and the Husqvarna, there's really no reason why you would want any other type of chain. I'm going to show you what they look like. Okay, this here is Stihl cutter, and this is a full chisel cutter. So as you can see, it's got a very white color on the top. It's more silver than gray. These Stihl cutters always have a line on them to help you sharpen them better. And on the side of a Stihl chain, you will see the dimples here on the drive link. And on a full house chain, which is a full chisel, you'll see that yellow. If it's green, then you know you have a safety chain. The green or yellow has nothing to do with the shape of the cutter, but it just has to do with whether you have an extra bumper on this middle link, intermediate link right here. What you want is a nice pointy cutter, and that's what Stihl offers, is a cutter that you can achieve a very good grind on with a file every time you sharpen it. I'm trying to show you the cutter profile here. You have a cutter that's able to achieve a strong hook, which is this part where the cutter dives forward that way more, rather than being kind of perched like that. And so the Stihl seems to achieve a very grabby hook. It's got a thick top plate. These don't tend to tear off as much as the Oregon, I've noticed. But the Stihl chain seems to lubricate very well. I think they all lubricate very well. When you're filing this tooth on a Stihl, you'll wear out, first of all, the chrome will wear out your files much faster. I throw them away after 3 sharpens. But when you get a sharp edge there, it's very definitive on a Stihl tooth, that basically that chrome will flake off, and you'll have a absolutely perfect edge right there, totally straight, and you'll know that you have a sharp tooth, which is not the case on the other brands. They do not sharpen that way at all. Let's see, this here is the Oregon 325, and there are no dimples in the drive links on this. I do not know why. They have transitioned to using dimples on some drive links. I don't know if maybe these holes are supposed to capture oil. That's probably the intent there. But the cutters on these are reliable. They hold a nice edge. They're actually sharpened with a 5/32 file. So the tooth on a 325 by Oregon is going to use a different file than a 325 by Stihl. 325 by Stihl uses a slightly larger file. You can see that the hook on this is not as pronounced as the Stihl chain, and that's not just a product of how it was sharpened. That's actually the way that the geometry of the tooth is meant to be. Now this does have a strong side cutting action on it, which is very good, but just remember the function of the tooth is primarily top cutting action. So strong side cutter action really doesn't save you that much. In fact, I think it actually diminishes the cutting speed of the chain. But this is a full house chain. There's no safety bumper here, and the chrome on the top, I don't know if it's possible to tell this, but this is quite a gray tooth on top. It's not nearly as silver chrome looking as the Stihl, and when you sharpen this, there's sometimes a matter of question whether you have actually achieved a perfect edge, because as the final little bit flakes off from the top chrome, I don't even know if it's really considered a chrome plating on top here, but they do have a guideline. Sometimes the tooth does not have a guideline on the 325, but this is a fast cutting chain. It's not the fastest cutting 325 chain. The fastest cutting 325 chain is a Stihl 72 EXL. This is the newest version of the 3/8 full house chain. They do have engraving on the side of each drive link, which is supposed to carry lubrication, just like the little pock marks in the Stihl brand drive links. On this, you notice that it is possible to change the geometry to your liking on a tooth because it's such a tall tooth. You can pocket this lower portion of the tooth out more on the Oregon chain, but what you really want to achieve with this is kind of a perfect angle to what the chain was born with, because when you change the angle on the actual cutter edge right here, what you're doing is you're making one side or the other thinner, and that the thicker side, it won't cut the same as the thinner side, and it causes an unstable cut. I do like this chain. It's a fast cutting chain, but this requires a sharpen every time you fuel up the saw, where the Stihl chain doesn't really need to be sharpened unless you've actually hit something with it. I can run a Stihl chain all day long and never sharpen it, and this chain, you'll be able to see even in just woods that have a slightly punky middle, it'll begin to have a mark there at the front edge of the tooth where you can see that's been damaged. So this material that this is made out of is much softer, which yields more usage out of the files, and I like being able to use my file more, but I believe the sacrifice in cutting speed is probably not worth it. I just have to use this reel up now because I spent all that money on it. This is much more affordable than the Stihl, but when I sharpen this, I'll eat up this cutter. If I dull this chain on a chainsaw during use, I'll be able to dull it 3 times, and then the chain will be useless. Where the Stihl, I can dull that and sharpen it, and normally I'd probably get 5 instances of that happening before I would have to replace the chain. So you probably get more use overall out of the Stihl, which makes it a better deal financially. But you have to know what you're doing to get that out of it. So this is a good chain. It is a nice fast cutting chain, and of course it comes in these massive reels. This chain from Carlton has different geometry. It's kind of interesting. I believe that the angle is going to be slightly different on the cutters. The geometry on this tooth is more of an arched top, so from the top of the tooth you'll see a little bit more of a beak shape, which is like this, rather than a straight top like this. And I'm sure that helps it retain some of its hooked. Let's see here, kind of helps it stay hooked. But the Carlton chain is not a good cutting chain off the shelf. You have to lower your riser a little bit, your Raker, just a bit to get it to really cut properly. And I think its one redeeming quality is that they have a slightly different angle on the cutter edge, which allows this to be better for cross-cutting grain, especially, which is great for like limbing off crotches and things like that, where you have knotty wood where the grain goes in a circular pattern or goes diagonal to where you're cutting from. But that is its one redeeming quality. This is a very soft metal. It doesn't come to you very sharp, and it doesn't cut very smooth. So I don't really recommend this chain. And if you must buy it, buy one reel of it, buy one loop of it, so you can try it out before you commit to buying a whole reel. All right here I have the Oregon chain cutter. Here is a good view of what a semi-chisel would look like, and this is what's offered by Oregon to instead of a full chisel point. This is a non-safety chain. So you see the single bumper right there, which is fine. Lowering the bumpers on this is kind of a task, because you can lower them too far with a gauge, and then the thing is cutting like crazy and chattering and stopping in the cut. So you really have to actually sharpen the tooth, and then after the fact, if it's not cutting well with the sharp tooth, then you should lower these Rakers. And that's the way to do it on this Oregon 3/8 Pico. I do think this is a very fast cutting chain, especially when it's brand new. And for the price and the time it saves you to have a reel at the house, I definitely recommend this Oregon 3/8 Pico. It runs very well on the bar, even though it doesn't have any type of a oil groove in the drive links, and it's a reliable chain. Again, has a propensity to lose teeth once you sharpen them down to a certain size. So just watch out for missing teeth and replace a chain once it has missing teeth. But this is a good chain. I do recommend it. I don't recommend it above Stihl. Stihl chain is faster cutting, and for tree climbing purposes, what this chamfer tooth really saves you from is irrelevant when you're cutting in the tree. This chain is probably more ideal for guys who use a 3/8 Pico chain for ground work, which I do not do, but I have the reel and I'm willing to use it. I guess when I'm buying chain, I'm not really thinking about getting the most for my money. I'm just thinking about having a chain on the chainsaw. And a lot of guys are thinking that same thing. I wish I had the Husqvarna X-cut to show you. I actually do have a Husqvarna X-cut chain here. It's hard for me to describe to you, but I will tell you. I'll tell you the features of the chain. So this is a safety chain I have here. I don't know how I ended up with a safety chain, but it's X-cut, and maybe this is the only option offered in this size of chain. I'm not sure. This is a piece for my pole saw, so it's 3/8 Pico, and it's got a very deep hook on it. It's probably close to being the same amount of hook as the Stihl, which a deep hook in the geometry is a really good thing because it allows. It's more of a penetrating cutter. When the wood doesn't want to separate, it's a lot more convincing when you have a cutter that's driving in this way rather than a cutter that kind of has like just a little bit before it tapers down and becomes thick. But they all do it a little bit different, and you'll know when you're running Husqvarna X-cut because it'll be an extremely smooth cut. It is not like other chains. It's both smooth and fast. Which is a result that is mostly achievable through Stihl and Husqvarna. But the guidance with filing rakers is very important with each of these chains. They do not all act the same. Dropping the rakers a little bit too far on a Stihl chain is no big deal, whereas dropping the rakers too much on an Oregon chain can be disastrous. It can be an awful time. With the Husqvarna chain, if you drop the rakers too far, it doesn't really care. It just stops in the cut, but you'll feel a lot less chatter. I don't know why that's the case, but it is. So I would point people in the direction of the Stihl dealer. The trouble is, of course, if you're running a different number of drive links, then you've got to go to a Stihl dealer that's willing to cut chain for you. And sometimes they're a little bit biased and they don't want to cut chain for a guy that's not running a Stihl chainsaw, and they'll tell you it's a different gauge or something, and it's a bunch of baloney. But most chains are 50 thousandths gauge, and that's I believe that's true for all of the chains I've just showed you right now. So that's the most common gauge which is the actual thickness of the drive link. If you were to measure the small dimension of it, how thick it is, like a piece of paper, the thin side, 50 thousandths. And so overall, I wouldn't say that I have a complete knowledge on this. But if you're looking to experiment with chains, again, I would say you should buy all the chains that go to that one saw. Buy a Stihl, buy a Husqvarna X-cut, buy an Oregon Power Cut is what the category is. And Power Cut will have an offering for 325 or 3/8. I believe 3/8 Pico also has an option for Power Cut. So Power Cut is basically what you want. If it says Power Cut, then that's the right one. And make sure it's the non-safety variety. And then let's see, that's the Oregon. And then the Carlton, you just have to make sure you're getting the full chisel, non-safety. And once you run all of these brand new, you might begin to get a feeling for which ones are fast or brand new, but then you try to sharpen it with the file and try to get it tuned up and maybe lower the rakers just a little bit and see what the outcome is and see if that comes out good. Like I said, again, when you sharpen a Stihl chain, it's almost as good as brand new. It's not the same as sharpening the Carlton chain or the Oregon chain, which don't ever seem to fully recover from being sharpened. So, but the difference being, I think probably the Husqvarna X-cut has a slightly square grind to it as well, like the Stihl. And that could affect the performance of the cutter as well. I think maybe they put a flat on the outside to reduce friction or something like that. But in any case, good luck out there with your chainsaw chains, and learn how to use a file and sharpen properly and get the guide tools that you need, and you'll have a lot more fun running a saw. Good luck out there.